Hello, everyone, and welcome. In this recording, I'm going to be speaking about a number of different subjects. One of them is the full moon in the sign of Sagittarius taking place on the 11th of June, and also the upcoming Cancer solstice. So, on my hemisphere, summer solstice. But please, when I mention the season summer or whatever I've mentioned, put it into the context of your hemisphere, what that season is in your hemisphere, because sometimes I forget and I just go with summer, winter, the seasons, because that's how I kind of learned. Uh, but in the full moon, in the sign of Sagittarius part, I'm not gonna go into greater detail because I have a in-depth video but on Nadia Shah's channel. So if you're interested in the more in-depth analysis of the full moon in Sag and also what it may mean for your sign, just check it out on Nadia Shah's channel when she'll publish it. So probably somewhere around the day of the full moon. But what I do want to mention, even with the risk of repeating myself and repetition about the full moon, Uh, yeah, so if you look at my screen, this is the chart of the full moon. Full moon always in opposition of the sun and the moon. So Gemini Sagittarius axis taking place at 20 degrees of Gemini Sag. So, like always, the ruler of the full moon is the ruler of Sagittarius. So Jupiter, which made just a few days before a very, or actually one day before just, anyway, a huge move. It entered the sign of Cancer, where it will stay until July next year, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a massive energy shift. So this full moon will definitely reflect this in its own way. Now, like any full moon, it is a culmination, it is a completion, it is either a pattern of harvest or a pattern of being able to see the truth in something, integrate something emotionally, because the moon is responsible for the emotional world, and something that may be, as I said earlier, a big truth being revealed, or a truth that we already possess, already are aware of, highlighted in a big way. So its importance, its significance, its meaning changes, it shifts. But it can be issues around anything legal, law, justice. It can also highlight issues around long distance travel, international relationships in any way, shape, and form, studies, job, work, family, friends, anything to do with travels. Um, of course, this can also highlight issues around faith, even in the religious sense, so religious topics, anything that might be relevant or might, quite the contrary, leave a big question mark, leave us under maybe a shroud of doubt, a shroud of needing to revise our belief systems. But it can also, Sagittarius represent our knowledge, our education, higher education, especially university and, sorry, the likes of that. What do we do with our specializations? How do we feel about it? Um, how does an event related to a study, or if you're a student, it's very easy for you to put it into the context of your life because many things revolve around it. But even those who have graduated a long time ago, something makes you feel or reflect, think, or a question of belief around your specialization, your studies, your mastery over something in theory, the theoretical part especially. Also, on the world stage, we can imagine that issues around law, international law, are going to be highlighted. Travel, especially air travel, airports, what happens in the air, basically. There can also be a manifestation of rain or the element of rain or something raining from the sky because it conjuncts minor power player named Huya, like a rain god, so that suggests the rain. It also is very relevant to maybe new discoveries being revealed, because that is the culmination of the intellectual process when you present what you discovered, your findings, your research about cosmology, space, but it can be any branch of science, knowledge, research, and stuff like that. The fresh discoveries of the James Webb Telescope about the Big Bang, but especially like putting it under a huge question mark and the limits of our universe and space-time and all of that. So that's definitely part of the picture, right? So it's already happening. But also, Sagittarius, religious activities, especially collectively, issues around religion. We already see that play out very strongly on the world stage, and also because of the aspects of the full moon. On one hand, T squaring the north node, so that means a grand cross. That's an aspect of tension, of course. This may suggest that the light of the full moon, whatever it reveals, or whatever it triggers, really, I don't necessarily want to single it out to the word transform, because maybe it's not necessarily a transformative energy for everyone. For someone, it consolidates. For someone, it strengthens. It solidifies one faith and belief and philosophies and worldview in something. For others, as I said, it might transform in the sense that it shatters it, but of course, it's still a very, very positive energy because chances are the new shatters the old. So there's no time for grief because the new is already there. Sagittarius, it loves the new. As moon is actually the feeling of what we love. So moon in Sagittarius just promotes in so very many ways the new, the next, the whatever has to take us, especially mentally, philosophically, higher, or where we need to be in order to progress. So Sagittarius always shows the big picture. So this is why this grand cross with the nodes of the moon. So again, nodes of the moon, very strong lunar energy, because the nodes are basically, how should I say, not just linked, but from the moon, the moon's energy effect as well. It's very karmic, okay, but it's still very lunar, and in the sign of Pisces, the North Node, very emotional, psycho-emotional. In any spectrum of that, the highest, as I said, philosophical, spiritual, religious, principalistic realms, to the lower unconscious and everything that lurks within us in the deeps. So even the home of traumas and all the shadowy stuff is included, but also the realm of the dream, realm of the spirit, realm of our own fantasy, the place of our fantasies, and the spirit's creational center within us. So that's the North Node here. A square means definitely a reality check. Do your aspirations, do your dreams, your belief your inner balance with your your relation with your own unconscious, your past and all of that, relationship with your own karma. How does that make you feel? And what does that mean for you, especially oriented towards the future? How does it serve you? Does it serve you, or quite the contrary, does it hinder you greatly and you need a big change? Like getting really out of the box in thinking, opening our minds, opening our, well, even souls in a way, because the moon and North Node in Pisces, that's the realm of the soul to new or whatever might realistically, because the reality check of it all, realistically serve us. It is almost like a reality check, but not necessarily like an earthly, practical, mercurial one, but rather, how should I say, a philosophical one, a deeply philosophical one, but also slash where that philosophy might direct us inwards into our unconscious, our past, everything that is stored deep within. But besides this square energy, the moon holds especially a few hours after the full moon as it starts um progressing forwards to the later degrees of the sign of Capricorn, Sagittarius, I mean, Sagittarius. It perfects a grand trine with Chiron and Aries. Oh, sorry, let me just read. So, Moon, Chiron, and Aries. And then, of course, Mars. Mars at this 26th degree of Leo is at the time of the full moon is already by the degree exact trining Chiron. So as I said, a few hours after the moon will perfect the trine, so it's a grand fire trine. This brings forth the really positive, the really Jupiterian side, the passionate Jupiterian side of the full moon. Well, Moon in Sagittarius, our aspirations, our hopes, our connection with our higher selves, and the more divine, the more non-earthly, the celestial part of our being, so to speak, the more cosmic us, and also the moon is going to be conjunct the galactic center, so we can actually even include the galactic center into this grand fire trine. So the energy of the hope, the faith, the belief actually comes from the very core of the galaxy, the source itself, the divine mind at play. And then Chiron and Eris in Aries, the self wound, because ultimately that's what we can reduce Chiron and Aries to. It can play out in a multitude of different ways, but the core energy, the nucleus of it is a self wound. I'm not enough, or I'm not something, and that causes the wounding. Aries, the principle of uprising and rebellion, the principle of creational even chaos, amplifies this energy because Mars energizes it from Leo, the heart, the passion, the will, the strength of, the inner burning. So the self wound transformed us, the situation, something in our lives. So this is where we see that many times wounds do have power, and they truly lead us to a different version of ourselves. Life, in many senses, is never gonna be the same after receiving the wound. However, this is exactly Aries. Make something with it, other than be defeated. Because this is Aries' principle. It knows and accepts no defeat. Even when all odds are against, she still finds a way to turn the tables, Aries. So the wound, the self wound, that which would usually lead to defeat, or as I said, I'm not something, not enough, or whatever. Well, that's usually like acceptance of that leads to termination. Yes, but however, that termination of one state may create or even as a cause and effect principle, drag after itself the birth of a new. And in nature, we can see in so very many examples where many creatures, for example, when they entered like very unfortunate situations, like they got stranded on an island or the climate turned very strongly against their survival, etc., etc. Well, it caused the wounding, right? But the wounding, if it didn't kill them, well, it caused mutation, adaptation, so they transformed into a new creature many times, which is so different from its original form. And the same can be said about this energy. So the full moon sh- sheds a light, highlights exactly this, who we are after what the wounding has done to us. With the North Node in Pisces, collectively speaking, especially, this can really draw upon the power of love, compassion, solidarity, the spirit of communion. All of us share the same wound. Your pain is my pain. And the way this can elevate everything, because Mars in Leo, the courage, the strength of the heart, the this is actually a quite a heroic energy, the energy of heroism, especially with Chiron in the picture, where the wound is the cry out, or the wound where when one person went through a serious wounding, you can imagine if they would see the same wounding play out before their very eyes in a situation with another human being, that would trigger them greatly. The Mars, the action, the jumping in the aid, the humanity, the brotherhood, the instinct of the hero, the instinct to help, the instinct, the pain, the same pain, the pain and the memory of the wounding can be such a powerful force, exactly if it's used in the most elevated and divinely inspired way possible, because ultimately galactic center, right? We must not forget about that. That's the divine influence. The North Node in Pisces, also the divine influence. South Node in Virgo. Let's release the, well, ultimately not stepping into helping, the weakness of not feeling strong enough, worthy enough, whatever enough to be a helpful force in the universe. So shedding off that energy. Um, so it can be profoundly healing, or it can really, really promote healing, efforts for healing, plans for healing, travel for healing. And Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, well, we must not forget the ruler of the full moon, Jupiter, in water sign. So we could see around the full moon the freedom flotilla case and what happened. That's so relevant with traveling by sea for a noble cause, courage, and their wound is the activist's wound, the sharing of the wound and wounding. So that type of energy will definitely play out even more intensely at the around the time of the full moon, and of course shortly before, shortly after. So actually, at I'm recording this on the 10th, so we're already in this energy. Uh, Another thing that I just want to include with this full moon in the sign of Sagittarius is that, as I mentioned earlier, Aries is also a very strong power player here, especially because she is energized, empowered by, on one hand, a very compatible energy, Mars. She is like a female Mars, so their energies are very, very compatible, especially in a trine where they fuel and feed and intensify each other's fire rather than clash, as it would happen in a square, for example. So Eris's fire is really fueled by Mars, and Mars is the ruler of the sign hosting Eris, and Mars is very comfortable himself in Leo, so very, very strong energy here playing out. So this can lead to a lot of uprising, a lot, because this trine, well, it empowers the rebel, right? It blesses the courageous, the risk taker, the fighter, the warrior, the person who had an. By no means am I encouraging anyone to go outside and protest and put themselves before risk in any way, shape, and form. No, 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 because rebellion, protesting can take place even in a non-physical, and exactly Sagittarius in faith, right? The creational energy, mind over matter. So it doesn't need to be, but we will see this. That's where I'm going here. We will see this play out. So we can expect a lot of uproaring. So rather than encourage this, in the sense that by no means am I discouraging, as in the sense everyone has their liberties and their own vision and heart energy, Leo, Mars and Leo, what their hearts want and what they believe in, absolutely. But especially for people who know themselves to be vulnerable physically or whatever, avoid situations like that, because there's going to be a lot of chaos and a lot of, as I said earlier, uproaring. Aries is going to be very, very active. And moon, well, emotion, moon, collective emotion at any full moon, emotion is high and the highest in that period. So emotion is going to be quite high, and especially around international stuff and affairs, because Sagittarius, or uproaring with something that happens overseas waters, and with conflict. Well, truth be told, a fire trine, well, it gives more fire, so of course it can amplify fighting and conflict. But to add to this, again, going to the ruler of the full moon, Jupiter in Cancer, well, Jupiter expands. So that expansion can greatly, how should I say, aggravate issues, especially what people are feeling, Cancer. And Cancer is the ultimately the home of the moon. Jupiter is the uh ruler of Sagittarius, so this is also a mutual reception type of energy here. And Jupiter loves being in the sign of. Anyway, what I want to say here, emotions are going to be very, very, not just high, but concentrated, especially around, well, Cancer, borders, territory, places, my country, your country, my nationality, ethnicity, group, family. So, for example, family is where in the United States, well, a lot of the clashes and protests, the core is the protection of the family, the safety of the community. the interconnectedness of people, the community, the Cancer energy. And the threads there, Jupiter is also law. Anything related to the law. So you can imagine that there is going to be a lot of legal stuff going around, big legal stuff, big initiations, things that we might not have seen in this size of intensity, let's say, on the world stage, because this is cardinal energy. Saturn is also on the world stage at 1 degree of Aries. So, okay, not zero, but one is also there. That's also on the world stage. Jupiter on the definitely 0 degree of Cancer. That's all, the world stage itself. So, this is a square between the two planets. Something is happening out there. It's big. Sun in Gemini, it hits the news. And Mercury in Cancer, exactly communities. Because Mercury is the news, is the communication, the information, and the sign how it is spread, local community, people, relatives, friends, how a community operates. That's how the information is spread, the news is spread. So it will be definitely an eventful period on the world stage. Now, moving on, I would speak about the square between Jupiter and Saturn because it's very, very relevant and it says a lot. It really invites us to philosophize a little bit in our lives, at least. But the Jupiter and Saturn square is also going to be active at the Cancer solstice. So what I'm going to do is include it in the Cancer solstice because it's an important part of it. So we close the full moon part. And again, if you want to know in more detail, just check out Nadia Shah's channel. So the Cancer solstice on the 21st of, June, when the sun enters 0 degrees of Cancer. So in a certain way, this ties in with the full moon because at the full moon, Jupiter, the ruler of it, is here. Now the sun follows. So it highlights, it illuminates, it puts attention really on what Jupiter has been doing there a few days before, as I said, at the time of the full moon. So whatever happens at the full moon, it reverberates here, and it will be an important part of the next the karmic cycle of the next 3 months, because that is what a solstice or equinox is, because it is the moment of reset when not only the season changes, but also karma's very own distinctive pattern within the larger cycle, so within the year. So the energy will be different. And what the energy intends to do or play out as usually is marked by key aspects at the moment of the solstice or the sun entering the cardinal sign. In this case, Cancer. So again, on my hemisphere, it's summer solstice. So again, it highlights something that we already saw playing out at the time of the full moon. And one of the most important aspects is that the sun is conjunct Jupiter. After a few days, it will perfect its conjunction. So, as they say, Jupiter will go into the heart of the sun and be reborn. And that in itself is gonna be a very strong energy shift because That is the moment when Jupiter starts getting out of the square energy. But again, before that, the Sun actually holds the square himself with this Saturn and Neptune conjunction in the sign of Aries. So what does this mean? Well, it means that this energy invites us to really think deeply about what elements in our worldview, life philosophy, beliefs, our future vision, our higher aspirations are serving the well-being of not just, one part, one role that which we play in life, but the integrity of the being who we are. Because very many times we might find ourselves that, especially this Aries energy, Neptune, the big dream, the big, you know, being in the flow of, chasing the dream, the desire, what we want, or even the energy of survival. Now, Saturn, of course, is the reality principle, the limits, what we can do, what we have to work with, what are the tasks ahead, where we need help, where we have, as I said earlier, limits. So we understand this energy. So that is the driving force. Saturn there wants things to be very real, very, very concrete, very reliable. The Saturn is very ready and available to invest energy, to invest, want, desire, ambition into something, but it requires wisdom and diligence. Wisdom and diligence is not provided automatically by the Saturn, because this is Aries Saturn. It provides the motivation, the strength, the energy, but the wisdom, the tactics, the path forward, that's really our job. That's why Saturn many times is not all that strong in Aries, because it doesn't give the default experience. Many times this Saturn in Aries is almost like, I'm sure many of us had this experience where at a job, two words, if any, and you're already there doing it and you have no idea what's happening, but you still have to make it, fake it till you make it. That's many times Saturn in Aries. It's there, it happened, the initiation, right? You're in the situation, no turning back. What happens next? Well, really, it's up to you. It gives you the strength because you're there and you're staying. You're not running away, right? But you need to figure stuff out. Like the survival energy. So this is where, if what's needed is wisdom, if what's needed is grounded, stable, reliable knowledge, a good prospect, or maybe introspection of something or the self, it needs to be grounded. And you provide that because Saturn does not provide that automatically. Maybe for some people, the situation is vice versa, where they do have the wisdom and all the knowledge or the plan or whatever is needed. They don't have the energy, the motivation, the resources. This Aries Saturn is also like that, where Saturn gives you 50%, but the other is really up to you, and usually where you're not very strong at. So you need to basically train yourself and become that. Saturn in Aries. Become what you're not. Out of sheer adaptability or survival, reaching your goal, but you need to do it, as I said, wisely and diligently. This is how the Aries Saturn works. So there's that. And this energy is very, very strong. But there is the other side, Sun and Jupiter in Cancer. That's the greater good. That's everything that nurtures you, everything that makes you work, makes you tick, gives you comfort, gives you, like, concrete example, bed, roof over your head, warmth, affection, family, food, bathroom, all of that comes along with the house. Any type of makes you feel alive, makes you belong somewhere, makes you feel that you're a part of earthly existence. There's that side. And with Jupiter, again, Saturn is not very comfortable in Aries. Jupiter is very comfortable in the sign of Cancer, which means it's very important. Anything that is your greater good in a realistic sense, because the sun, that's why it's there. The sun highlights this. The sun makes sure that it's visible, that it's not hiding in the background, that the importance of well-being, self-care, nurture, safety, groundedness, whatever you need for earthly existence, basically. Whatever that means for you, that's important. And this is the square's energy. So the two should not be enemies or incompatible with each other. That's why this is a reality check. Where do my directions, my aspirations, the big dream, or my survival energy, what I want to initiate, do? Where do they take me in the sense of my greater well-being, comfort, belonging, safety, nurture, my greater good in the simplest way to word this, right? Because if the desire, the path I want to walk on, I realize under the square that it's not gonna lead to this. This will become the sacrifice, maybe. So my greater good, comfort, well-being, nurture, etc., family, house, belonging. Then we need to revise. Then everything needs to be revised in life. Because these two, in the worst case scenario, have to become tolerant to one another. Maybe parallel, that's also a way of life. That's also like certain archetypes, dual signs. It can be parallel, but as long as it's not again, it works perfectly. So the working of they're not bothering each other is the person's responsible for that. For other people, it can actually cooperate. There can be a middle point. There can be where um, something can both serve your direction, your dreams, or survival, but that also indirectly, or why not directly, contribute to your greater well-being. Let me give you like a very easy to understand example where maybe someone is at crossroads with their job, where with their professional identity, right? Self, Aries, Saturn, job, Neptune, the dream, who am I? Uh, and Jupiter in Cancer with the sun illuminating this. Well, it's not just important, this isn't just important for them, it's important because that person wants to either do their family proud, provide for their family, is a good parent, so he needs a stable job or whatever. And this energy makes the person revise a lot of things in their life, and they come up with the plan that, well, let's start a family business, hitting many birds with one stone. Together with the family, The spirit of the family is definitely there, sharing experience and everything. And survival, the business, the work. If this is possible, a new dream. So you see where the challenges brought on by the square, things that make us think, and what we believe in, what we believe or not the future to be, potential possibilities that can change a lot in our lives. For example, Jupiter in Cancer, support is there. Family members, parents, friends who we consider as family, community, souls out there, right? Support can be out there, and support can change a lot in a person's situation. Support can change how Aries does its job, in a sense, how Aries chooses to manifest its Aries side. Because if there is grave urgency and survival and toughness, roughness, well, of course, it's like a battering ram. But if it's not tense, if it's not big survival mode, then it can chill out. It's a totally different Aries, right? So, again, where our duties, Saturn, of a relation with work and sacrifice, of a relation to duties we have towards the self, self-preservation. We're responsible for our own happiness, especially with Neptune adding to this. We are responsible with our own relation with the divine and the cosmos, Neptune again. And again, the cosmos is just like another person, really, in the sense that it's up to us of how we, you know, I'm not even sure which word to use, but ultimately where we guide our relationship, where we steer the relationship. It's up to us. Because, like any relationship, what we give, what we get. Compromise, bears the balance, negotiation. What we project, what is projected back at us, trial and error, doing things together, knowing, getting to know one another. Of course, in this case, where it is the cosmos that's the partner, getting to know the cosmos may be a bit one-sided, may feel a bit one-sided, because the creator force knows us, right? Yes, however, it doesn't want to know our reactions, our choices, what we will choose. That's free will. That's where we write our stories with that. So it doesn't even want to know that part. That part we provide to the story. So the relationship is unique. We can't find the relationship in any sacred text or any other person's philosophy. We need to form and maintain and guide and steer the relationship how we see it fit, how life, you know, determines basically, and how we react to that. So it's not set in stone. The relationship changes, evolves. Sometimes it's colder, other times it's more passionate, but this is also very much part of the Jupiter in Cancer energy, because that relationship with the divine is basically an act of self-nurture. So Saturn, square with Saturn, what serves our greatest good and how do we integrate that into our immediate goals, what we want to build, our work and our duties to the self, and the dream that guides us. And other energies playing out at the time of the solstice, well, the sun holds to the degree exact sextile the moon and the sun hold the sextile, where the moon is very comfortable in the sign of Taurus because it is exalted there, and the sun is in the moon's home, so welcomed there, along with Jupiter. A very positive energy where Taurus, what we embody, what we strive to embody, is ultimately what we're gonna get. Just like as a tree grows, it really, really depends on its environment because whatever surrounds it, other plants, animals, the terrain, the weather, will determine how quickly it grows. So, exactly the embodiment principle, where we place our roots. If we place our roots in a hostile uh, territory where the weather conditions or the surrounding plants or animals are not very okay for our species of tree, then the wisdom, Jupiter, to plant it, and Sun, of course, in Cancer, to plant it where it will feed us, where, nurture at least is guaranteed. So, sextile, the wisdom of what we embody, what we, and also it's not just Moon in the sign of Taurus, but also Venus at home. She rules this sign. So very, very strong Taurian energy based on values, on what we love, what brings us joy, what nurtures us, what brings us, you know, pleasure ultimately. And Mars is also in new territory because it is in the very early degrees of the sign of Virgo. This is also a very strong practicality oriented energy, where Virgo, as it also holds the south node, sorry, it's the rational. It needs to make sense. It cannot be just sheer philosophy, exactly the embodiment principle. Because the moon trines Mars. What we embody needs to serve us well and make a lot of sense and be rooted in physical reality in the earthly. So this says that the coming next months need to be rooted in very strong honesty with the situation and self, practical knowledge and good advice, and also knowing for a fact what will not work and not serve us, not to include that or not to have false hopes. Um, and also, we cannot ignore that at the time of the solstice, well, Uranus is anaretic in the sign of Taurus. So that means instability, big, big instability, financially, especially. And we see this everywhere on the world stage, the tariff wars and all of that stuff, but also in our values, what we love, what we tolerate towards the bull. When the bull reaches the end of its tolerance, well, it's not a pretty sight, I can tell you that. And that's very much anaretic Uranus and Taurus. The end of the tolerance. But the end of the tolerance can also mean in a very non-emotional, in a very physical way, where volcanic eruptions, tectonic movements, the earth shaking, because the end of the resistance of, I don't know, the volcanic vent or whatever, the boom is there. It can no longer be contained in this sense. The end of the tolerance. So a lot is going to be shaken up by this Uranus. Also, we will see certain technologies, but especially where they fail and they need re-improvements. They need going back to the drawing board type of energy with this anaretic Uranus because it will come back here when it somewhere in July it moves into the sign of Gemini, but then it retrogrades back into Taurus for a little bit and permanently enters Gemini to stay there in 2026. So, and this energetic Taurus energy will be active once more. This isn't the end of it. So we'll see some extremities, extreme weather phenomenon, extreme calamity somewhere. In 2011, when Uranus was energetic in the sign of Neptune, along with Neptune being energetic in the sign of Aquarius, we saw the Fukushima disaster, and that basically shook the whole world. We may see something of that caliber. Let's hope not. Let's hope not, but well, and of course, I'm speaking about the upcoming next 3 months, so not necessarily on the 21st of June. In the coming 3 months and even after, because Jupiter, as I said, not Jupiter, Uranus will come back to this n degrees of Taurus later on. So that is also going to be part of the picture, unfortunately. And Jupiter in water sign, water again, expanded water. I know it's in a comfortable position here, but that can expand, that can add to its expensive qualities even to the extreme. So flooding is definitely going to be part of the picture, but it may also highlight very strongly the positive, healing, life-giving, life-bestowing properties of water because it will trine at a certain point dwarf planet Gongkun, the Chinese flood god in Pisces. So floods can also rearrange the terrain and for the long run, do something positive. But this can also represent places where water is extraordinarily scarce. Water reaches those places and it unlocks fertility. So a lot is is potentially bound to happen in this sense. In water and underwater. And the water is also within us, our emotions and our, feeling and especially in Cancer, even to one another, not just this contained self, but also one another. So I hope this helps. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, bye for now.